thank you for joining another Talent Minders podcast. My name is Andrew Zach, Talent Minders principal consultant and founder, and I'm proud to bring to you another of our podcasts to share real lessons learned by accomplished HR leaders about how to drive greater value in the 21st century. I'm happy to have a highly successful international talent management leader, author, speaker with me on the podcast this week. Michael Andrew is a former chief talent officer and member of both the executive and board committees at a company owned by members of the Saudi royal family. Previously, Michael was the group vice president of talent management and leadership development for Emirates Telecommunications Corporation based in Abu Dhabi. He is currently responsible for the CEO and top leadership succession at the Saudi Telecom Company, otherwise known as STC, where he also leads their executive coaching practice. Years prior, Michael worked with leading Fortune 500 companies, including McKinsey, Rockwell, Shell, Compaq, to name just a few. Today, Michael is going to share his perspective and experience to help us better understand how the role of the CHRO is fast changing to better drive performance outcomes and the implications for the HR field. So welcome, Michael, and let's get started. So Michael, please, maybe a good place to begin is, why don't you give us a brief introduction of your background and expertise in talent management, including your current role at Saudi Telecom.
Okay, well, thank you, Andrew, for having me here. I always like, whenever people ask me about my background, I'm always proud to say that I actually started my career in finance. And not that I wanted to. I did not want to start my career in finance many years ago, but it was the only area I could get a job. And you know what, in retrospect, the way things work out, it was the best thing that could have happened to me, because by working in finance, hands-on, day by day, and taking on a number of finance roles for a number of years, it's helped me in talent management. So when you have those discussions around the business and you're able to speak the language of the business, which is finance, and when you're working with senior executives and trying to define what's going on with the company, and they speak to you in financial terms, and you understand, and you can ask the right financial questions. So I started my career in finance. I finally got a break many years ago when I was working for this big company to make a transition into leadership development that then evolved into talent management. But basically, let me focus on the last maybe 10 years. I had a consulting practice. First of all, I was the head of the Global Leadership Institute with Rockwell Automation. I had a consulting practice where I don't know how I did it. I look back and don't know how I did it, but I gained major big clients, Fortune 100, Fortune 500 clients around the world, working with clients like McKinsey and Compaq Computer, Digital Equipment, Lucent Technologies, Prudential Insurance, BP, Emco, and so forth. And one of my clients was a company called Emirates Telecommunications Corporation in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai. And that client turned out to be a full-time employer. Starting in 2009, I was a vice president for the group vice president for talent and leadership, responsible for everything from the development of the board to VPs to directors and so forth, succession, hypo programs. From there, I had to retire. I hit a certain age, I had to retire, but STC, Saudi Telecom, picked me up, and I went to Saudi Telecom. I took a quick break from Saudi Telecom to work for a company called Al Faisalia Group, which is owned by members of the royal family, and I was the chief talent officer there on the executive committee and a board advisor to 3 of their boards. And then I came back to Saudi Telecom, which has been a great experience working in all aspects of where they take succession management very, very, very seriously. And they take leadership development very seriously. And so my role right now is working on succession for the CEO and the people reporting to the CEO, executive appointments, which is when we promote people to GM or VP, we'll hire them from the outside. And I help out with the hypo program and also help out with some coaching.
Super. Yeah, Saudi Telecom has got a very strong reputation for spending a lot of time on not only leadership, talent development, but leadership development, succession. And it shows, I think, in their performance and just the culture of the company. That's super. That must have been also very interesting working with the Saudi royal family.
Yeah, well, it was, I don't know, it was part of the King Faisal family. And yeah, I got to meet a few members of the royal family. My boss was a Royal Highness Prince, very humble,
It's
very
fantastic.
smart, Harvard MBA.
Yeah,
It was a great experience.
that's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Great. Well, today what we're trying to do is we're trying to revisit the subject of HR capability, strategic capability, and focusing specifically on the CHRO and that particular role. And the key charge for the CHRO is increasingly to turn talent management into an instrument of business transformation. I mean, really, it's changing that whole equation into an instrument of business transformation that advances strategy, develops agile leaders, really spends a lot more time on that leadership piece so that organizations are able to drive business forward in a much more efficient fashion and that coalesces into culture. Can you give us, I mean, have you noticed that in your experience? Can you expand on this a little bit about what you're seeing with the role of the CHRO and how that's changing?
Boy, that one question opens up certainly an hour-long discussion.
We've got almost that much time.
Yeah. I appreciate this, where you're taking this, Andrew. But I'm trying to figure out where to begin. Clearly, I think we all agree, those of us listening, and you and I, Andrew, that HR or the CHRO must be a business person first who happens to have worked in HR during his or her career. And I think we all agree that that's what the HR role should be. It should be that instrument, using your word, to make things happen in the company in terms of the realizing its strategic initiatives, its goals. And in today's day and age, transformation is a big one. You talked about being the instrument for transformation. Certainly, it has to be that today. By the way, it should be owned by everybody in the company, not just HR or the CHRO, but the CHRO plays a unique role in creating the environment and the processes and systems and the capabilities to make that happen. What frustrates me a little bit is, I mean, you and I have been around a long time, and for so many years, for at least 40 years, HR has always been talking about being the instrument to help the company achieve its objectives, execute its strategies, all that stuff, getting, quote, a seat at the table. And it just hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. There are exceptions, and there are exceptional HR executives, but it hasn't happened the way, in theory, it was always supposed to happen. And that's proven by the amount of HR conferences that still have the same topics over and over again for 40 years.
If I could just interrupt you 1 second, it's almost like it's almost like the and I've got some years in the talent management space, but also heading HR as you do. And it's almost like we got the role definition, the success profile, if you wish, wrong. And we've never corrected it, because when you start thinking about, when you start, thinking that the primary focus for the CHRO is around, transformation, advancing strategy, right up there with the CEO, and developing culture and agile leaders. I mean, this is not what you described before. This is not about data management and IT implementations and
operations,
and sort of thing. This is a very different profile, and maybe that's part of the challenge that we've had. Go ahead.
I think so. I think that's why I always like to say HR should be business people first who happen to be working in the HR profession. You know what the great example is? Jack Welch, when he was chairman and CEO of GE, he always maintained that his most important hire in any division in GE was the top HR person, because he didn't look at this HR person as a HR operations. He looked at this HR person and making sure that we have the right organization and the right capabilities in place to achieve what we say we want to achieve, to be who we say we want to be. And that really is what HR should be. And they've been aspiring to be that for too long, though. there are exceptions, but it's frustrating that HR isn't where it should be because the opportunity's been there and they've been there for too many years.
For too many, 30 years or so, at least, it's, well, we'll come back to that. That's a great point. It raises a question for me about STC, if they will allow us to indulge just a little bit. Tell me about the CHRO at STC, because I know he's a very special guy. And yeah, tell me about how he works and how he thinks, and how would you describe him?
I wasn't expecting this question, but I'm glad to answer it. And there are certain things I have to keep in confidence, as you can imagine. But
yeah, absolutely.
I'm not saying this because I'm on a podcast, Andrew. I did a recent LinkedIn video where I didn't mention names, but I was talking about this person. He is, I would say, the best HR executive I have ever seen. He is far more than an HR executive, although he's the VP of HR. He is part of that executive team. He belongs at that table with the executive team. The executive team knows he belongs at the table because he's contributing in the discussions all around the business, some to do with HR, but most not. And you won't see him speaking the HR language all the time, which most HR executives do. He belongs there. He knows he belongs there. He's incredibly politically savvy, which is different than being political. He knows how to work these meetings and the interactions and the discussions. He's a major contributor, and someone that is that good an HR executive. I see a person like that. Eventually, the world is open. They don't always have to stay in HR. They can go.
They can go anywhere. But see, that's why I almost wonder if we've got the success profile wrong for this, this particular role, because, in my experience, I go back 30 years or so. I can tell you, I can count on maybe two fingers, and I've met that gentleman that you're talking about, and I completely concur. Absolutely brilliant, almost like a conductor in front of an orchestra. He's got all the understanding of the people and the organization and how all that work, how people, what motivates them, what inspires them to want to follow and go forward, leadership. But he also understands the business piece, and he can speak across those platforms just beautifully.
To the point, Andrew, where he has strong viewpoints and can advise and influence around the business, not just around an HR policy. And that's what's really good about it. And that's what we really see. And that's how he's viewed. And that's why this person is so well respected.
So, to this point, to sort of help lead, please help us lead business transformation, helping us advance strategy in a very practical, measured way, developing agile leaders, not just overseeing sort of leadership development teams, build programs, but really be intimately involved in the competencies, the structures, the processes, the programs, making sure that these efforts and investments are strategic, so our leadership is definitely growing in an agile way. Yes. And coalescing in the culture. CEOs are saying, in order to do this, the CHRO is going to have to possess a much broader range of knowledge and leadership skills than they have shown in the past.
And business skills,
And business skills, yeah. So let's.
And you know something, Andrew? It's when you've got the right type of executive in a CHR role. This is what I see. The average norm or the average HR executive around the world, they're basically told what to do. So the executive team of the CEO will tell them what to do, and they jump and they do it. Whereas a really good, powerful HR executive will influence and can advise and have viewpoints about what we should do. Then a good discussion ensues at the executive table. So they don't just do what they're told, they actually advise about what needs to be done for the benefit of the company.
And I've seen situations where a strong CHRO will come into an organization and they are immediately affected by this very common influenced by the CEO and other executive teams.
Yeah.
And they push back. They push back and they educate. It's part of it is education too, gentlemen, ladies. You're not speaking the right language. We're not building the right relationships. You don't really understand my role or the value proposition, what I can bring to the business. Let me show you. Let's change the course of our discussion here, so
Yeah.
that people can really start to understand how HR can contribute at a much more strategic level. And I can assure you that some of our strong guys and girls that we've experienced in this role over the years, if they were, pinned into that sort of culture, they wouldn't remain in that role, because, they recognize that they can't really make a strong contribution in that type of culture and environment. So,
Right.
um, well, let's see,
Right.
let's have a little bit of fun here, for just a moment. I'm going to call out some specific knowledge and skills areas relating to the CHRO, and you just give me a number of 1 to 5, 5 being outstanding. We see it all the time, and one, of course, rarely ever or never, um, in terms of how prevalent they are in the CHRO office.
And
So,
in general, not just with my company, but
no, not
in
your
general
company,
around.
in
Yeah.
general, over your
Yeah.
years of experience. Okay. So, vigilance in scanning the external environment to anticipate business and talent threats and opportunities. Just give me a number. I'm going to note it down here.
2. Not done enough. Yeah, I
Strategic,
think it's.
sorry, go
Yeah, go
ahead.
ahead. No, again, they're more operational and not paying attention to the external environment and the trends and so forth, in my opinion.
Okay, now here's one that we always talk about. They always go to the boardroom, they have a seat at the table. Strategic thinking skills to work with the CEO and the executive team to, very importantly, set direction.
Well, I think to influence direction is a better word, because I don't think the CHRO should be responsible for setting direction for the company. It's the whole executive team led by the CEO, but they should certainly have as much influence as the VP of Finance, VP of Operations, VP of any of the business units. But in strategic thinking, I'm sorry for a long answer, is a tricky area, because that's different than strategic development. But strategic thinking is making sure that you clearly understand the strategy, that you can articulate it to anybody. And also, every discussion you're having is aligned to what the strategic direction is of the company. So that's what I think strategic thinking is. I think you see some HR people doing that well and half not doing it well, because again, it's still focused on the HR world. So I'll give that a 3.
Okay, excellent. Cross-functional business understanding with a P&L orientation.
Well,
So
I
really
think
understanding the different functions. Go ahead.
I think I'm surprised at how many executives are intimidated with finance, therefore P&L orientation. They just didn't have that type of training and background. So it's not just an HR thing, but understanding what's going on across the business. Again, that's that business perspective, being a business person first, HR perspective, HR executive second. I'd give that a 3.
Okay, cool. Okay, we got about 6 or 7 of these, just so that the audience knows where we're going. But I think
Okay.
they're all very important and very relevant to the role today, increasingly so. So the fourth one is courage and decisiveness to prioritize, to succeed, or to fail fast and move forward.
1.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm being very critical of the HR profession, but I don't see a lot of courage. I think they back down quickly and do what they're told to do. So I think we need more courageous HR executives taking that business perspective to influence the discussions with the executive team.
No, I think that's very good, and I think holding up the mirror and being very authentic about how the state of affairs is very, very important as we think about the future, because business is calling a very different leadership in play, and I think we're going to have to think very differently about how we come to the table and what we exhibit in terms of skills and
Good point,
competencies
Andrew. Good point.
to be successful. Okay, how about conceptual skills to shape organization to meet tomorrow's demographic challenges? So this is systems thinking, conceptual skills to shape organization.
Again, and by the way, I'm talking HR in general around the world. And I just tend to be critical of the HR profession because it has so much potential that it's not tapping into the value and contribution it should bring. So I'm going to say I'll give that a 2 because I think
Okay,
the focus is still on the operational too much.
cool. And we're still focusing around the CHRO office, so I guess that would on
Yeah,
average be a 2
yeah,
as well. Okay,
yeah.
super. You've touched on this one before, financial acumen, specifically to broadly balance resources and understand financial implications and trade-offs of investments in every aspect of the business, including with talent.
Yeah, I'm going to give that a 2 for the CHRO office, and I'll give that a 3 in general for executives in general. I think executives admit that as good as they are, many of them are intimidated with finance as a language. So, but for CHROs, I'll give that a 2.
Okay, super. Technology savviness to drive efficiencies and engage workforce through innovations and technology solutions. Really digitally minded.
Yeah, yeah. That's actually a good one, and it's currently relevant, isn't it? Um, uh, you know what? I don't know about the technology savviness, but certainly technology awareness that these things have to happen. So I'll give that a 3 or 4. They're aware of these things have to happen. They may not be savvy technically like I am. I'm not savvy at all with technology, but I think CHROs need to be aware of the implications of being innovative, and that's part of the whole transformation effort.
And you think that you're seeing quite a bit of engagement of the workforce through innovations and technology,
I think as long as
strong,
the
fast adoption of technologies.
yeah, well, certainly in my company, and by the way, that's not because of the great CHRO. That's part of it. It's a cultural thing right now where that's being driven from all different parts of the company, from all the different SVPs and the CEOs. So it's it's a very clear key message that we have in the company because of the nature of our business being a telecom ICT company.
Okay, and so as far as the broader business base, then what about risk management perspective with regard to talent? And this is again not specific to STC.
Great question, Andrew. That's a great question. Risk management as it applies to talent is something is often overlooked. And that's why we have succession plans, because if you don't have succession plans, you risk having a pipeline or a strong bench of leaders to sustain the company into the future. So succession planning is like a risk management plan where you mitigate the risk by having a succession plan. I hope I didn't sound too technical with that.
No, not
So
at
I
all.
think I think CHROs are getting it, but not just CHROs, by the way. Boards are driving the significance of succession management, which then comes, is driven down to the CEO and the CHRO. So I'd give that a higher rating. I'd give that maybe a 3.5
Wow,
because
that's quite
not all
high.
companies not all companies are doing it well, but they. What are you saying that might be too high?
Yeah, I think again, I'm asking you. So but just from a just conversational perspective, I've seen what I've seen is the last thing a CHRO is thinking about really is the risk perspective regarding talent. We think about numbers around, do we train people? Do we have a budget? We talk about we have our insights around diversity and attrition and cost per hire. But, even when we sit down and we do talent reviews, the HR manager or CHRO is often for the first time learning about the data. And they should be intimate about the data. They should know very intimately, even better so than the BU heads in the executive suite, who we have, what is the profile, to your point of succession, where are the primary gaps, and where do we anticipate having growing gaps, all that stuff as it relates to presenting or posing a potential risk for the business as we think forward. I don't see a lot of that coming from the CHRO from my
Andrew,
experience.
yeah, thank you for pushing a little bit on that point. I think I'm being influenced a little bit by my current organization, where I would honestly rate it a 5.
Oh yeah, no.
Because we're reporting to the board every quarter on risk, succession, and everything else. So I might be influenced by that. But in general, I agree. I think it's a low score, maybe a 2. And even companies, all the studies show that even companies that have succession, many of them are not happy with the way they're doing it.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
so in general, I get a low score.
Yeah, it's amazing how many organizations are not thinking about simple things like retirement. They're going to lose over the next 5 years 75% of their leadership force. I mean, what are you going to do? Anyway, I just want to just clarify for the viewer that your responses to all these questions, if you will, are not relating to STC, just so that everyone knows that.
In general,
definitely not an STC survey. Okay, so that's good. So what about ability to convey importance of talent at all levels as a fiduciary issue to the board and to the leadership team?
But you're really raising some great scenarios, great questions, Andrew. Because honestly, this isn't a sales pitch. I work for an organization where that's already in place, and it's not coming just from the CHRO. It's coming from the CEO, from the board, from the executive team, including the CHRO. So the company as a whole gets it, and it makes the CHRO's job much easier. It makes our job in succession and talent much easier, because we don't have to do any building a business case. It's already there, and they see it, and it's driven by the board. But in general, for the most part around the world, we companies as well as CHROs need to step up much more than they have in that area.
Okay, what would you give it in terms of numbers? Go on.
Yeah, no, I'm going to give it a. I'll give it a 2.
Okay, all right, excellent. Okay, excellent. We have 2 more here. Legal literacy to help ensure a culture of compliance and integrity at every level of the organization and across borders. So legal literacy.
Okay. I'm sorry to say, this is another area where our company is making very clear, deliberate efforts, where all of us have gone through training, mandatory training on ethics and integrity. So my answer is not about my company. My answer is in general, and I would say probably if I'm being generous, a 2, probably a 1. Let's say 1.
Okay, and then the last one relating
and
to
how much more fundamental is integrity and ethics? That's as fundamental and basic as you can get, and it's getting a low score.
Yeah, no, that's very telling. Okay, the last one around regarding the CHRO office is this notion around operational ability to ensure the transactional aspects of HR are well executed in a world of fast-moving and changing expectations of the employee population.
Well,
so the ability to execute, get things done on time as they need to be done in a quality fashion.
But you're talking more about the operational end of HR, right?
So this is the CHRO, the head of HR.
Yeah.
Their operational ability to ensure transactional aspects of HR are well executed.
So by transactional aspects of HR, are you talking about benefits and payroll and medical insurance?
Anything, I would say. I would say, the launch of a new HR system, the launch of a new HR human, performance management system.
Gotcha. Something, I think that's where HR excels. The good news is that's where they excel. The bad news is that's where they excel. They're very good in the operational aspects, the transactional aspects, and that's the reputation they built. That's getting away from the strategic approach to the role. So I would give them probably a 4.5 in that area. That's where they excel, and that's great. But it's not. Cool. It needs to be far more than just the transactional operational. It needs to be more strategic.
Interesting. I think I would have given it I would give it a 4. I'd probably give it a 3 to 3.5. In my experience, part of their issue is not their They are very project program oriented, but it's their lack of business awareness and lack of business partnership. I'm not talking about the HR business partner role. I'm talking about just generally speaking, where we find the execution is very often slow, and does not meet the needs of the consumer. But I do agree with you. Operational, the transaction is certainly the area where you know, the CHRO office seems to be the most comfortable. Looking across these numbers, you know, we're looking at an average of about 2.5, I think,
Yeah,
probably.
yeah, yeah.
So it's interesting. We'll come back to sort of your perspective on that in just a second. But
Can I throw something in there, Andrew?
you bet.
You know, we're being very critical of the HR executive role, but you know, I'd also push on company executives and CEOs to put more demands on what they expect from the CHRO to contribute, to provide more value. I'll give you one example. I'm going to say something a bit controversial, and I hope it doesn't get misconstrued. But if you look at all of the annual reports of the Fortune 100 companies or Fortune 200, 300 companies, and in those annual reports, there's always a page that shows the top executive team and their titles. And they always have one female. And what is her role? It's always HR. And so I think if we really believe in diversity, we need to do more than just putting a woman in charge of HR. And we need to get away from always having a woman in charge of HR, because what that tells me is that they're not taking it important. They don't take HR as important as the other functions in the company. So let's give the female representation of senior leadership to HR. And I think every company deserves more than that in terms of diversity and in terms of getting the best people in those roles, even beyond HR.
Well, I think that's a very good point. Yeah, absolutely. And I do agree with you that, you know, there needs to be more. There needs to be more, definitely more engagement, more effort from the CEO. And I think the CEO education, their development can you know, can certainly benefit from having better understanding of the people organization, the complexities associated with that, and the requirement. Even something as simple as you can have a great strategy, but if you don't have an org designed to support that, you're not going to be able to execute that strategy very efficiently. And
Great,
you
great
certainly
point.
may
Yeah.
not have the people then that you need to execute on that organization and
The
strategy.
people, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that's important. But here I really want to hit on the CHRO, and I want to really push us as an HR leadership team to think differently about how we can contribute. We need to be much better and differently prepared if we're going to take on this role and be successful at it. And this simple example, we have another piece coming up in just a moment, but the simple example we just completed shows that we are woefully, I mean, of course we're generalizing, but I can tell you in my experience, I mean, I can generalize. I mean, I've seen a lot of companies in my time, and you know, they, you know, clearly the office does not emphasize these particular areas that business continues to request. Certainly, if companies have a smart CEO, it makes a difference. There was a there was a quote here I was going to finish on, but I'll bring it up now. I think it fits in very nicely. It's it's from the Agilent CEO Bill Sullivan. I don't know if you've seen this or heard of this, but he
Yes, I
said,
have.
quote, Agilent has completely transformed itself several times over the last decade. It's a very successful company. Along with the evolution of the company, we have deliberately transformed HR function, the function. Perhaps something we can leave. And so that's something that we can, you know, reinforce at the end of the podcast as well, that, you know, the CEO uh, needs to play a greater role in not only selecting the CHR role, but also holding them accountable, much as he or she does with the rest of the C-suite in terms of results.
Andrew, that's a great example from this particular CEO, and I don't know, I haven't read about, I don't know much about the CEO, but I'm willing to guess that he's probably from an up and coming younger generation, because the good news is when we talk about trends, I do see the newer CEOs coming in that do have higher on their agenda, talent, succession, building capability, having the right organization. And that's and this CEO fits that mold. So it's a great example.
So the if we can continue this little fun exercise for just a moment, we've got another 7 or 8 of these questions. Now, this one here is, there's no question that the CHRO today must possess these largely strategic and more technical types of capabilities. But the research that's all around us today clearly shows, increasingly so, that emotional intelligence, exemplified by self-awareness and empathy, are really critical to gaining trust and commitment for this transformative change. So again, it is a skill set. It is a mindset that's very deliberate and important. So I'm going to go through a few additional areas, and please give me on the scale of 1 to 5 what you think, how each of these is prevalent or not at the CHRO's office in your experience. Okay. Not specifically STC, but just in your experience. Yeah. So the first is unfailingly model desirable attributes of culture and passionately advocate them. So they walk around and they walk the talk. They show people how to behave in a way that's consistent with the culture, the values.
I'm going to say 2, but I also want to say this doesn't just belong to CHRO, it belongs to all executives. So I would say for all executives and for CHROs, 2, because how many of us know that when we define values, they're stuck on a wall, they're put in a book, and are we really walking the talk when it comes to the value? I'm going to say 2 for everybody, all executives, not just including CHRO.
Okay, cool. All right. Okay, another one here. Balance the role of advisor of the CEO with the role of advisor to the board on CEO succession and compensation, and also advise on new board member acquisition and onboarding.
I wish that were a 5. I wish that
STC
were a 5.
Is probably higher.
That's great value, but no, that's that happens. I personally see it happening now. Again, where I am, because we have those meetings quarterly, but in general around the world, they're not brought to the table. They're not brought to that table. So I'm going to say 2.
Okay. Cool. Thirdly, develop a mindful culture to embrace change and drive high performance in a multi-generational employee population where flexibility and adaptability for the workforce at large. So it's developing a mindful culture to embrace change and drive high performance in multi-generational employee populations with flexibility and agility or adaptability.
My answer is going to be the same as the last one. I think that belongs to everybody, not just CHRO. But CHRO needs to be the conduit or the instrument, using the word that you said earlier. So I'm going to say a 2, only because it's the execution piece. They might say the right things, they might say the words you just said, but to really make it happen, it really doesn't happen the way it should. So 2 for understanding that. I mean, 5 for understanding that, but 2 for making it happen, and making it happen is the most important. So
yeah, I think you summarized that very well. I think 5 in terms of intuitively, we get it, of course. In fact, that's integral to my role. But on the execution side, I give it 2 most generously, because I've never met one, well, maybe one or two, that really understands how to do that, and really, as part of their training, as part of their DNA, as part of their strategic work practice, are able to sort of live that day to day and help
Right.
others do that. Because that's one of the
Yeah.
challenges, as you know, with the business, they have no idea, and nor should they, in a sense. They rely on that coaching and guidance from the CHRO at that level. Okay, what about transform HR processes by leveraging both the new art and the new science available today, including neuroscience of top performance, as well as technology and data analytics to drive better decisions, to better anticipate workforce needs as business requirements change, to manage performance, and to support real learning. So there's a lot there, but
Yeah.
they're actively transforming HR processes by leveraging new art and new science available today.
Not fast enough. Again, I think everyone's aware that of the potential value of data analytics, but the way you just position that whole premise, Andrew, it's not happening fast enough. So two.
And I think what I'll do is I will cite where we got these questions below
Okay.
the podcast, so
Okay.
that our guests can go back later, and if they wish to use these, they can for their own purposes. They're very useful. Okay, we have three left. So next, cultivate a compelling employer brand from the inside and the outside in, with a strong marketing orientation, aligning all aspects of the organization around a strong purpose to drive engagement.
See, I don't think that should be a CHR role exclusively. That needs to be driven by the whole executive team and CEO. So I want to take a little bit of the heat off the CHRO on that one.
Oh, you're
But
so nice, Michael. You're so nice. You're too
I've been,
kind,
you know,
sir.
I've been too critical, but you know, a lot of these CHO does play a role, of course, but you know, it should not all be on the shoulders of the CHRO. We have to put a lot of the weight, a lot of the accountability on the entire team, and that's when it works well. By the way, if the CHRO is fighting a feudal battle by himself or herself, and the executive team isn't listening, either the CHRO isn't influencing well enough, building a proper business case. But it's much better when you see the whole team working together and they understand what's at stake. So I don't know what I should give that because I think it's a responsibility. I'm going to give an answer that I think belongs to the whole company. I'll give that a 3.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. So from my experience, if I can add to that, is this whole notion of driving engagement is not well understood. It's not part of. It's not something that's, again, it's just because of how we have positioned engagement in the past. I've been involved with engagement surveys for 20 years, and that's what it's been. It's been a survey. But why is it 20, 30 years later, we still talk about how we don't execute the data? We don't change. We don't act on anything. We don't have a stronger culture of engagement despite having annual surveys. So I think all the executives need to play a role, of course, but it goes back to that conductor metaphor we gave earlier in the podcast. It's the CHRO that really needs to take the lead, I think, in helping people to understand, how to sort of, bring all the pieces together, and in order to generate a sustained employee engagement level, which
Yeah.
is satisfactory.
You know,
Because it's all about the survey, right? It's all about the survey. No, it's a lot more than that. And the business guys won't be able to, they're not going to take that initiative. It's really the CHRO that's got to say, you know what, this is one of my goals, by the way, for the year. This is how we're going to proceed. This is how it works. This is your role. These are the steps to take. This is what we're going to measure. This is going to, so on and so forth. Go ahead.
yeah, this is where good management in general comes in. You could have the best engagement processes, surveys, follow-up mechanisms in place, but if an employee has a bad manager, they're not going to be engaged. It's going to be very difficult to keep them engaged. to me, engagement is really a function of how well, in general, people manage inside the company, what the overall culture is. No matter how well the CHRO office is trying to implement engagement practices and processes, this really comes down to fundamentally how well, how good are, in general, are the managers in our company managing for results and managing people with dignity and respect. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. My friend, we have two left, if I may. So the next one is around innovation and talent management, engagement, retention strategy, driving opportunity for all. Um, in a fast-paced environment of change.
I think that's another one I'm going to say conceptually, they get it. 5, I think every CHRO would answer that as a 5, but making it happen, which I think is the whole key for all this, especially in the CHRO office, I'm going to give it a 2 again.
Okay, and the last one here is about reshaping the organizational design and rewards structure to reflect the dynamics of the business environment and the new world of work with a more mobile and less permanent workforce.
Again, our company pays critical attention to that, and it's an active, ongoing issue that our HR sector is paying a lot of attention to. So, and it's never going to be perfect because things are always evolving, but I love what they're doing in that area. So my company aside, I'd say in general, I'd give that a 3.
Cool. Cool. So the average on this set of competencies is about 2. So we have really an overall average of about 2. And this is what CEOs are telling us, that the CHRO really must be able to do well to help them move the business forward. And again, I personally, having been in that role before, I completely understand the dynamics and the concerns. It ain't so easy. It's certainly easy to be on a podcast and being critical and so on. But the intention is not to be critical. It's about trying to really put it on the table that it may be time to think differently about this role.
Well,
In terms of what is required for success as we go forward. Go ahead.
Andrew, you know something? You're absolutely right. And do you mind if I tell you a little personal story?
Please do.
When I was 17 years old, a senior in high school, there was no such thing as human resources. If those of us that are old enough, we remember it was called personnel, the personnel department. And I remember we had a college night where different colleges came to the high school, and representatives of those colleges were talking about why we should consider their college. And of course, I was interested in studying business, but I didn't know what quite to major, in business management. All of a sudden, this college comes along, and they said, one of our majors is human resources. That's the first time I heard of that word. I'm like, wow. Okay, that's taking business management and people. And I listened very carefully to what this representative of this university had to say. He said the exact same things related to all those questions you asked me, although your questions are related to 2020, 2021, innovation, transformation. But the same themes and messages around being strategic were back there 40 years ago. And now we're still having those discussions. And that's what makes me so I was very enthusiastic, naive. That's what I want. That's what I majored in, actually. I went to that university and majored, and wow. And 40 years later, all these things are still conceptual and in theory. And the theme of our answers here have been around the execution. And so in getting invites to go to a conference that says why HR should be more strategic and why how to get a seat at the table. My feeling is if we're still talking about it 40 years later, we're not doing a good job. And so that's why the newer generation of CEOs, I think, are getting it. And I think that's going to help.
Well, I love that you say that. And that's the sort of thing we should keep on the table in the light, in the context of this discussion. And that's why I think, it's kind of like giving giving me the role of a neurosurgeon. Let me work on your brain. I have no train. I don't know. Am I going to be successful? I don't think we've really given it the role, the level of attention and importance, strategic value, and time and attention that it needs, as we have the other roles, because it's people. We're not hard numbers, we're not finance, we're not customer, we're not the marketing and so on, operations, the manufacturing, is the quality. We're just the people. But it's actually one of the toughest roles, if not the most toughest and most important role within the business. I think it requires a different person. I think we need to define requirements differently. And I think it's important that we, instead of spending the next 30 years talking about we need a seat at the table and never getting there, I think we need to stop having that conversation and think about
you know
it
what the big the big
differently.
mistake is? How many times have you heard people say, I want to study HR, I want to work in HR because I like working with people? Has nothing to do with it. I mean, we all like working with people, unless you're a real introverted engineer that has these great knowledge and skills to work on some scientific, innovative engineering things. But we all like to work with people. So when I hear people say, I want to get into HR because I like working with people, if you're doing HR right, it has nothing to do with it. It's taking a business approach and making sure you're building the capability to allow the company to be who they say they want to be. It's not about you like people, therefore you want to work in HR. That's the wrong approach, and that's not the people we really want in HR. It's
Yeah,
really being a business-focused person first. I'm going to end it with, I'm going to just provide two last quotes that I think summarize what I think HR can really bring value to the company. The former chairman of Pepsi is a man named Roger Enrico. And I read this quote many years ago, Andrew, and I love this quote. He said, and this is Pepsi, everyone knows Pepsi. He said, as chairman, I have two roles. As chairman, I have two objectives. The first is to grow the business. And the second is to identify and develop the people who will help me achieve objective number one. That's what a great CHRO can do. And the other quote is from the former CEO of Campbell's Soup. And he said, to win in the marketplace, you must first win in the workplace. So we got to get our act together in the workplace so that we can win in the marketplace.
that's awesome. And the in your experience, you mentioned that this is nothing new. um, this phenomena, this challenge. Why do you think we're having such a tough time delivering on what the business needs? I mean, it seems like the head of legal and operations, manufacturing, sales, as I mentioned, and so on, they seem to have gotten it right from a function standpoint. What's happening over at HR and the CHRO's office? What's the root cause?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're being very critical of HR, right? And I think justifiably so, because they do need to take a business focused approach to their role. But we also need to be critical of the CEO and the CEO team in terms of the potential value and contribution HR can bring. But the good news is I'm seeing a generation of senior executives with that mindset. So I think we are going to see the changes that need to be made. The other thing to look at, are you familiar with the McKinsey 7S model,
Yes.
Andrew?
Yeah.
Okay. So in McKinsey's 7S model, we're all trained, executives are trained on what they call the hard S's: strategy, structure, systems. That's what we work on. But there's the 4 S's that are very subtle that make all the difference in the world.
Good point.
Which is the skills, the shared vision, the staffing, and the style. If we only focus on the hard S's, we get stuck. Those are the visible ones we see. We restructure, we put systems in place, and we put together a new strategy. But it's those underlying fundamentals, the softer S's that McKinsey talked about, that really have an effect on moving things forward. So all of us in the company need to focus on the entire 7S, not just the 3 obvious hard S's that we're trained to do. Yeah.
Great point. I think what I'll do, Michael, what do you think? I'll put in for those that may be less familiar with that model, I'll put a link under the podcast so that you can,
Great
if you're
idea.
not familiar with it, you can look that up. It's
Great idea.
very important. Great point. So related to that, Michael, I'm just wondering myself, thinking about root cause, we've kind of touched on this on the educational side. Certainly from the business side, as we think about business schools and just internal management development, maybe there's an opportunity to get the business closer to the people and to the organizational side. If we look at HR folks, is there an opportunity, do you think, is there a role for education or maybe professional certifications to emphasize this issue more about, the changing nature of HR and how to be successful in a 21st century business? For example, if you look at SHRM, for example, just take an example. I'm not sure the curriculum spends a lot of time on the first part of our exercise today, and how to do that. Maybe we're coming out of our education with too little business awareness. Go ahead.
Again, I'm going to say something that's not going to be pretty, and it's going to be a bit provocative, I think. I could care less about professional certifications like SHRM or CIPD that they have out here in the Middle East. What that tells me is people have made an effort to learn about speaking the HR language and not as much effort learning about the business. So if they have certifications in SHRM, that's great. That's okay. It shows you have an interest and passion in that field, but we should be making just as much effort to learn as much about the business in general, developing your business acumen, developing your corporate acumen inside the company, and not just speaking the HR SHRM language, speaking the corporate language, the industry language, and financial language. And that to me is going to make much more an effective HR executive than someone who's has a number of SHRM or CIPD certifications.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think you really truly have something there. I think the way we are, bringing up our children, so to speak, is not, let's put it this way, it's not comprehensive enough. So we come out understanding what performance appraisal is, or how to give feedback, but we don't understand systems thinking, or we don't have conceptual thinking, we don't have analytical thinking, we don't have finance, marketing, we don't have customer experience training, or any of the other financial or business acumen that will make us a more well-rounded. And we often we often think about, well, we pick that up internally as part of the development process, but even these rotational assignments as an HR player, they're not very often, they're not structured, they're not measured, and they don't give you the same. You need that platform on which to build that awareness and that experience. And so maybe education can help.
You know something, Andrew, similar to the HR profession, let's take the finance profession. Okay. We could talk about a CFO, Chief Financial Officer, the same way we're talking about a CHRO. A great CFO doesn't just know how to create balance sheets and P&L statements and ledgers and manage the ledgering process and everything else, and put together cash flow statements and give good proof and for the auditors to ensure that they get approved by the external auditor. A good CFO knows far more than just the numbers. They have that good business acumen. They know the implications of these numbers. They know why we have these numbers. They're not just technically good in accounting, they're good with their general business acumen. And those are the people that make good CFOs, not those that are just top-notch accountants. And it's the same thing with CHROs, not those that are just SHRM qualified and they speak the HR language, but they understand the business and they understand the implications of not having good succession or talent programs and the risks of not having them, for the greater good of the company. So
that's a great analogy. Yeah, that's a great analogy. And again, that's a fantastic analogy. Yeah, and it plays out that way, doesn't it? A great accountant is not a great CFO, for sure. There's so much more there. Right. And by the way, people and organization are very much a part of that. So as we close today, Michael, I'm sorry we have to close today. I mean, this is so much fun, and hope we can do this again. How, from your perspective, how can the CHRO, so these ladies and gentlemen who are actually in this position today, what can you recommend they do to set what we've discussed sort of in motion, sort of transform their role and indeed the broader HR role to be one of having greater strategic impact and value to the business?
I'm taking down my notes for my thoughts here. A couple of things that come to my mind is always take the top management perspective. McKinsey teaches that. Take that top management, take that executive perspective, not just the HR perspective. Number two, step up. Step up. Don't wait for the CEO to tell you what to do. Step up and influence and advise. Be a strategic advisor to the company, not just an HR advisor to the company. Elevate your role. I always tell people, if you're a manager, elevate your thinking as if you're a director. If you're a director, elevate your thinking and your actions as if you're a general manager. So as an HR executive, elevate as if you are part of the CEO. Well, you are part of the CEO team. So elevate so you earn that spot at the table, and you bring that credibility when you speak, because you're speaking beyond just HR. And finally, make an effort to not only keep up to date with the HR profession to be an effective HR executive, but make efforts to build your business acumen and corporate acumen. I refer to corporate acumen as understanding how the organization is structured, how the organization is aligned, what's the purpose of the different business units and sectors inside the organization. What do each of our subsidiaries do? Why do we have these different subsidiaries? So build your corporate acumen, and that to me is all about becoming a good business person first, HR executive second.
I love that. And on that note, this just triggers something that I recall, that some of my clients and in my experience will actually include on the career plan of a CHRO or potential CHRO a P&L post. So they'll send Michael Andrew to run a sales team or a product for a particular business area, and that is a great way to learn the business, because just taking a plane trip to the manufacturing plant, meeting everyone, I mean, that's kind of up here, and CHROs do that all the time. But getting in there, rolling up your sleeves, and being accountable for making the right decision around a particular business area for a year or 2 years is great training for potential future CHRO.
I agree, Andrew, and that's a great example. I agree.
Well, Michael, thank you very much, man. It's been great talking to you today. Thanks for your valuable experience. And as we close, anything you want to close on? Anything you want to say to close?
First, well, thank you. It's been my pleasure, and I appreciate how well prepared you came to structure this podcast and facilitate in a way that made this 1 hour go by very, very fast, at least for me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael, for sharing your immense experience in this area. No doubt you'll be helping heads of HR to better understand their changing role, or they should start to be thinking about their changing role as they gear up to better help drive business outcomes this 21st century. It's becoming a very, very different set of challenges and capabilities required for success, for sure. If you want to reach out to Michael, check him out on LinkedIn as Michael F. Andrew. And thanks everyone for joining. Tune in next time for another Talent Minders podcast. Have a great day.